Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Skills, baby. I am your host, Kelly Ryan Bailey. Each week, I chat with inspiring visionaries about the skills that make them successful, how they developed those skills, and their innovative approaches to improving skills-based hiring and learning around the world. My guest today is Jennifer Seith. Jennifer, did I even pronounce your last name right?
Did.
I should have asked.
Did.
Good. Well, Jennifer is the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at Randstad USA. She leads Randstad's talent strategy and innovation team, where she is responsible for creating technological solutions to innovate the company's talent acquisition strategy. She plays an integral role in driving candidate acquisition and engagement, employment branding, and recruitment technology systems for Randstad. As a respected thought leader, Jennifer brings over 20 years of industry experience creating technological solutions that solve talent acquisition challenges at a global scale. She resides in Atlanta, Georgia, and holds a master's in business administration from Brown University, as well as a master's in business administration with a focus on entrepreneurship from the IE Business School in Madrid. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. It's good to be here.
Such a pleasure. And for, the interesting thing about this, and I can't even remember if I told you this, Jen, that I actually started out and became passionate about skills because I worked for a subsidiary of Randstad in New York City.
See, that's good. It all comes full circle, doesn't it?
It always does. I got to see that inside view of like what was happening with hiring managers and what was going on with the hiring process. And back then it was like 15-ish years ago. The group, it was called Sapphire Technologies. If you remember that one. Yeah, and we were really focused on IT. We were doing skill-based hiring, even though that like wasn't what was really happening. It was just a manual process back in the day. So you guys have always been really on the forefront.
Well, it's like so many things. You do it by rote or by gut and instinct, and then all of a sudden there's an academic name attached to it, right? Product is now a thing.
So
Skills
true.
is now a thing.
So true. Well, Jen, I gave a couple of highlights of what you've accomplished, which is amazing, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of what has led you here to Randstad, a little bit more about your journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, that could take 6 months, but it always scares me a little bit when you hear your bio talked about and they're like 20 plus years of experience. And I'm like, I'm not that old. So no,
I like to just say experienced.
experience. Wise is the other word I like to use.
Wise, exactly.
So it's exciting. I've been at Randstad for about 3 years, and I've been in the HR technology space for over 20. Started out at an applicant tracking system that became People Fluent. So some of
Oh,
us
wow.
remember those. And my job at People Fluent and then into Career Builder was really learning the HR technology systems and
Mhm.
how recruiters utilize them.
Mhm.
So very much to your point about how you did skills-based hiring, if you think about a recruitment process, and what the technologies can offer you on how do you conduct a search or how the technology actually matches people to jobs. All of that was being talked about 20 years ago as
Yep.
the ETSs and the job boards started becoming the thing, right? So
Mhm.
I go back to those days, spent many years, 14 plus at Career Builder, learned a ton, launched an industry changing, I believe, construct called Talent Network, which
Mhm.
is conceptually the idea that a talent can just drop off their basic information and be matched to jobs always on,
Yes.
and basically engaging them to come back, which actually had a lot to do with skills behind the scenes. We just didn't talk about it.
Right.
When you think about matching algorithms, skills are a critical component of that. So I came to Randstad about 3 years ago. Super exciting role, really looking across all of our lines of business and all of the different places that we try to find talent and how to acquire and attract, retain, redeploy them, and really started digging into the technologies we were using and started trying to narrow it down. The
Mhm.
most exciting thing for me about coming to Randstad, um, outside of things like the job boards, if you will, is that you can see the full life cycle of the talent.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you acquire them, but then you get to hire them and then you get to redeploy them. And so being able to leverage technology in that scenario, full life cycle was really what drew me in.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting part about all of this, to be honest, like knowing what we were dealing with 15 years ago and hearing your description from a technology perspective, that was really like the in-between piece that we needed to be able to scale this, especially for large staffing firms or for large employers, because there's just no way to manually go through that process. Like we had to enable all of that technology to be able to help us and assist us.
Well, you do. And I mean, anyone that is watching this or any of our friends who have ever done recruiting know the old Boolean search string, right? I
I
mean,
was totally just thinking that.
how long can they possibly be? But at the end of the day, that Boolean search string goes back to you're looking for skills. You are looking for certain components of talent that search can actually provide for you. So now, of course, we have the academic rigor around AI and machine learning and neural networks and all of those things. But back then it was doing the same thing, just on a little different level.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me too, because this is, the transgression of your career is really interesting to me, just because like the work that you mentioned with Career Builder and that particular tool, and now bringing that to Randstad, like I'd love to actually just keep on the personal side for one moment and maybe talk a little bit about enough about skills to be able to say like, what are really the skills that have helped you along your career?
That's a phenomenal question. And it's so funny. Someone yesterday asked me to sort of give an all about me description. And when you have to put your entire life on a slide, you really have to think about what actually was
So
important.
true.
What's important, following the boy didn't make it on the slide. But when I think about it, it's soft skills, and people are talking about that so much more now. Again, that academic conversation, but it's the soft skills. I would not have been able to learn technology. I was not a technologist. There's nothing in my being that knows how a fax machine works. But
Mhm.
I learned technology because I had relationship building skills with people in technology. And when you learn how to communicate and when you learn how to build relationships, keep relationships, speak to different types of people in different types of roles, those soft skills make all the difference in the world,
Mhm.
because
So
then
true.
the door opens for you.
Mhm.
So none of the academics in my life, even though I love them, you critical thinking skills from your liberal arts degrees are obviously critical. Technology skills. I studied furniture. I studied art history. I studied English literature. But those things taught me how to think. And they
Right.
taught me how, more than anything, to build relationships as I go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's it. I love to hear these answers. It's a similar thread that I'm hearing throughout this podcast series, is that it always ends up going back to soft skills. It is very curious because typical, like what I would say, formal education does give you a wonderful foundation. But I wonder if too, like what you described, even though that gives you a wonderful foundation, do you agree that you feel like you have to be out there in the world actually using them for those to really kind of grasp for you and make sense?
You absolutely do. And I have a young son, and I was talking to someone in the skills industry, if you will, a couple of weeks ago. And we both said that it would be incredibly beneficial for our children to work in the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, or the grocery stores. Like,
Yes.
if their first jobs in high school, in our minds, should be going to work in a restaurant. You've got to learn how to serve people. You've got to learn customer service. You've got to learn basically negotiation strategies. All of those things you learn on the job when you're young. And those are the types of industries that can prepare you.
I completely agree. And the interesting thing now too is that we are seeing this huge amount of unemployment, especially geared towards those industries. And I'm sure that you are going to agree with what I'm about to say, which is that these people that have these fantastic foundational skills make for wonderful employees across the board. And it is so surprising to me why it is so hard, because maybe they don't have the right degree, right? When we bring this all back down to what their unique gifts are, that they aren't immediately seen as potential wonderful employees. It still is mind blowing to me, because to me, I look and I see like, wow, they have every foundational skill that you need. Maybe there's a little bit of like technical upskilling,
Yeah.
but for certain roles, but they'd make a fantastic salesperson. Like the list goes on.
Right. Well, and I don't want to just blame technology, but there is definitely a role that technology plays in that. And there's definitely a role that our when you think about recruiting, the process and the dependency that we have on the technology plays in that. Because when people like that, when you, for example, we have customers right now who are looking for hundreds upon thousands of call center representatives. I mean,
Yes.
everyone's shopping from home, right? Call center
Mhm.
representatives, customer service, the hospitality talent are the perfect types of talent for those roles. But
Yes.
technology screen them out automatically because they don't see that they have that experience. And so
Mhm.
we have, I believe, a responsibility to make that change. But you literally have to go back to old school recruiting tactics
Yes.
when it comes
The
to
Boolean search,
the,
go.
that's what's happening right now. And it's not that we don't think chatbots and everything else are the best thing going. They are, but in a time like this, it's a combination you have to
Yeah.
use.
So Jen, tell me like how, okay, so I feel like I have a question on both sides of this. How would the person that is looking for that type of role get through these systems, or what are the best strategies for them to do to be successful? And then also on the other side, how, I mean, what can we do to help with this technology? I mean, I know broadly what, but I mean, right now in the interim, because like this seems to be a huge problem that unfortunately leaves a lot of people suffering without work and on unemployment.
It does. And you know, it's interesting. I heard a new trend recently that I want to dispel.
Okay.
Using your platform, I will. There's a new trend out there that recruiters are telling talent not to put their addresses and or their location on their resumes.
Uh,
And that's a really dangerous trend when you think
okay.
about the fact that technology generally matches people to jobs based on their geography.
Okay.
So the number one keyword search for talent, when they go to Google and type in things like, you know, jobs in Atlanta, it always has in Atlanta on it, right?
Right.
Or in, you know, Phoenix or whatever that may be, because everyone searches for jobs based on geo. When you don't put your location, even if it's just your zip code, in your resume, the matching technology through which you applied knocks you out because it's matching you based on geography. So that's not even a skill based thing. That's a very
Okay.
practical, make sure that your location is on there because you'll be kicked out.
I'm really glad you said this because I think a lot of people are doing that because they don't want inherent bias.
Correct.
And I mean, there's talk about not having your name on there anymore. But right now, today, the systems as they are, like this is a beautiful future view that we
Yeah,
all have. But you're correct. Right now, the systems as they are, that's not something you want to do as a candidate.
that's correct. And I agree with the inherent bias conversation. I actually, to some extent, agree with taking your name off.
Mhm.
However, the technology that is in place is not the technology that we're thinking about.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of organizations are using 10, 15, 10, 8-year-old technologies that don't function that way. And the bias mitigation component hasn't been built into those technologies.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out because I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your other question, when we think about how talent, hold on, let me go back. I think I've lost the other question. What was the other question?
No, the other question was, so we were, yeah, we were talking about first how the systems that they are today are causing these sort of hospitality folks to basically not match up to customer service jobs. And so we talked first about what the candidate can do, and then also on the reverse side, what we can do from a technology perspective in the interim, because we know there's big changes that we want to make. Just that
Absolutely.
takes a while.
I appreciate that. I was getting very excited about the talent side. When you think about what we can do on our side of the fence, outside of just going and buying new technologies, because candidly, they're not there yet.
Yes.
When we talk about the need for one global skills ontology, this is a soapbox you and I share.
Yes.
You need to be able to have a talent who is a customer service person, be a customer service person across all different organizations. That doesn't exist yet. And the fact of the matter is, the technologies as we know them have got to be changed. But
Mhm.
since they're not being changed, we do have to look at truly looking at who that person is on paper, but also who that person could become.
Yeah.
You have to look at, you think about a parser that looks at a resume and pulls out all the keywords. Those keywords need to be filled with the types of skills you're looking for.
Mhm.
And if it's soft skills, then let's figure out how to make sure that a recruiter is trained to read a resume to understand the soft skills that could be there. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of recruiters are, obviously, but
Right.
when you get into high volume recruiting, those things can be missed sometimes.
That's a really good point. I'm actually making notes because I'm like, ooh, so recruiters being trained. Now, this leads to so many other questions for me because I'm like, man, this is I'm definitely someone who's like, let's figure out a way
Right.
immediately to start to help this. And I realize sometimes when we say these things, they seem like huge sweeping statements, like how the heck are we going to train all these recruiters to do this? But I wonder if maybe you've had some thoughts around, well, are there ways to do this quickly and broadly so that, again, when I think about the technology, right? So someone can do the best thing that they can do to make their resume seem more appealing to the system itself, because once it gets through that system and it gets to a person, that's sort of like step one. And then step two is making sure that that person, that recruiter, knows what to look for. How do we get to the recruiters then? How do we
Well,
help them?
there's two ways to do that. And I mean, Randstad's obviously a different ball game than some
Yes.
corporations because we have so many recruiters. But I think there's two ways to do it. There's an onus on the talent to think about including skills in the resume, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong, and I love it, to have a section that says skills.
Okay.
And the skills don't have to be things like Excel usage or, Java developer. They need to be Java developer and things like strong communication skills, strong presentation skills. And we used to do that 20 years ago,
I
right?
know, right? We always had the section. Yep.
We had a section, but we're going back because what will happen is the technology will pull that out. And I think that a good place or a good way for talent to think about what are my skills, right? It's hard to sit down and write out what you're good at. Like if
Yes.
someone said, "Are you good at presentation skills?" I'd be like, "Sure, but I don't want to put that on a resume. It's important that you do."
Yes.
Another good way to think about it for the recruiter side of the fence is that recruiters need to understand inherently what a role can lead to. It's
Mhm.
kind of like what a translation is.
Yes.
Bad example, but I think applicable. When you think about military occupation codes, right?
Yes.
Codes. A 12347 could equal a, I don't know military codes, but something like, a data analyst or something like that.
Right.
What skills are implicit with the data analyst? How do you translate a military role to a civilian role? You have to do the same thing on the normal everyday side of the fence.
Exactly.
If you're a customer service rep, you implicitly have these skills. If you're a restaurant worker, you implicitly have these skills. And as long as recruiters are thinking about those implicit skills, they'll be able to see through the words on the paper. And
Totally.
that goes into a little bit of the classification and technical ontology and all that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
until the technology can do it, we have to be the classification.
Right.
Either
Right.
will.
No, and it's so true. This is actually just extremely helpful. I'll give a, that I work with MZ, and it's the reason I'm making notes right now is because I am working with a partner on creating a skills-based resume builder. And the idea of this is so that, and this is the thing, I also work on these like futuristic ideas of the learner employment record and all that. But today, the way the technology is, and this is why I'm like, you're verifying the things that I inherently know and I'm struggling to communicate, which is like today, the way the technology works, we have to play to that.
You do.
Like we can't move all the way to the future because that's not there yet.
Well, and it's unfortunate. I think you and I are both innovators, right? And there's an unfortunate, but there's a fortunate component of it because as you start playing to the current technology, you start seeing the gaps, and then you can start identifying the gaps and trying to go for them. There
Yeah.
are very, very large gaps, as you and I know, like again, the
Yeah.
global ontology, right?
Yeah.
But there are also gaps that can be closed now. And when
Right.
you think about this is a strange example, but at Randstad, we were working through the other day. When you post a job as a recruiter, what's the job title? Now that sounds pretty basic, right? But the job title that you post externally is not only critical to SEO, it's
Yes.
critical to the neural networks and the AI and all the algorithms that Google and
Yes.
everyone else are using. And those job titles have implicit skills. And they also can have implicit bias, correct?
Yep.
So when you start looking at something as simple as the drop-down box that a recruiter has to select a job title from, you've got to be very cautious about what type of talent you're going to acquire and what
You
the
do.
performance is going to be.
This
And
is
that you can play to now. You can play
no,
to that.
and it's so true. And this is something else that I'm working on, which we're going to have to continue this discussion later because I can't even let this cat out of the bag yet. And
Are we bringing wine?
yeah, we'll bring it's a good one. But I laugh all the time because like my job title is just not it's not a job title you see all the time. Maybe someday like evangelists in terms of job titles will be a little bit more common. But right now, if someone was to try to search something based on my job title, like it's not gonna happen. Marketing ninja, all the cool things that we want to have out there, which are great. It's still from a system perspective, it's really difficult then to make connections and to get through.
Well, and I'll give you an interesting example. One of the reasons that we created Talent Network at Career Builder was to solve that exact problem.
Yes.
And it was an example that I still love to this day. We had a customer looking to hire 600 reminiscence care coordinators.
Wow, reminiscence.
Lovely name. And it's a very genteel job description title. The job description was looking for registered nurses with dementia experience.
That has nothing to do with that title.
But they were looking for people to go work in reminiscence care or memory care centers, right?
Okay.
What happened was the client came to us and said, we can't find these talent. How do we do it? Well, the job title was the problem.
Yes.
But the implicit skills that a registered nurse requires weren't anywhere in that description. So the jobs weren't being picked up.
Yep.
That's when we started looking at how does a job title translate? What are the implicit skills and what does it mean to denote or translate, if you will, what the talent says they are versus what they can be or what they really
true.
And that's
when you talk about this translation, though, it's so interesting. Like in our world, we hear about the skills gap all the time. I would argue that it's actually, there is a skills gap. So I'm not going to say that there's not. I just mean, I think the communication gap is much wider.
Yes, I agree. 100%. And it's the translation gap, I really think, because
right. Exactly.
The lack of, sort of employability across companies.
Completely. We could talk about this forever, but I really want to dig in a little bit on some of the innovation work that you're doing at Randstad, because I am just really thrilled to hear some of these things and whatever you're comfortable sharing, Jenn, because it's, you guys are, I've always felt like, again, going back to my experience many, many years ago and what I've been working on since then, staffing firms, in my mind, get a bad rap because we were doing that skills-based hiring and learning right from the beginning. And I think there's a lot of experience that you all have and the ability to work with such huge numbers of employers that give you this amazing purview into the world of this.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I'm relatively new to the staffing industry, but I felt that from day one, because when you realize that we're putting 100,000 people to work a week, that is implicitly happening. And we are looking at talent and putting them in the right roles to make sure that they are in a role that they can perform in and succeed. So what I'm excited about and what I realized, when I first started at Randstad was we had a need. We needed to do some normalization and classification and all those big words. But now that we've done it, we're able to really look across our databases of talent and decide who can become someone else and be able to think about their future employability. And I honestly, and Randstad does too as well, we believe it's our job. I mean, we believe it is our responsibility as the employer of that talent. So when you have that kind of volume, it's very difficult to create a massive scale. So we are starting a little bit smaller, if you will, and focusing on the talent that we believe that we can help find the next jobs based on gaining new skills, be a redeployment. So if a talent works for us, and again, it's very different across different lines of business. So if you're a warehouse worker, you may work for us for a couple of weeks. But if you're a technology worker, you may work with us for a year. When you start looking at the differences, you start figuring out how can we help those talents skill to learn new skills to either be redeployed in a current or similar role,
right,
because they've gained new skills at a higher wage, or actually find a new role, especially with the COVID factor.
Right.
And so I've sort of taken it on. We're looking at it globally. I think it's incredibly
So
exciting.
amazing.
It's,
Yes.
but we've been talking with or working with a lot of our technology talent. And so
Mhm.
we're looking at our technology talent, and we've created, as part of a partnership with Udemy, a 6 different learning paths that they can go through. So things like AI and machine learning, full stack development, all the certification tracks.
Yep.
AWS is the thing, right? All of the certification tracks. And we're saying to them, if you're within about 120 days of redeployment with us, we're going to offer you the ability to skill and go in and take all the classes you want to towards the most in-demand jobs that are available in the market.
Amazing.
And so when we did that, I think the thing that excited me the most was we were very targeted with one goal. We wanted it to work, right? We wanted to make sure that there was adoption and that we saw results versus just throwing out a program out there and saying,
Yep.
hey, you can take a free class. And what we've done is we've seen a 50% adoption rate. 50. And I mean, I was over the moon, 50% adoption rate. And these talent are literally spending 5.6 hours on average taking classes.
Wow. That's a
6
lot.
weeks. I got math right here. In 6 weeks, they had taken over 2,700 hours of coursework.
That's amazing.
And so what we found was we were very targeted about the people we approached. We didn't send an email or we didn't target the whole world. We said, these types of talent who we know are looking for these types of jobs need the skills to become those people. Let's offer it to them and see if they take advantage of it. And so that's really our goal, is to be very targeted, see how we can help people gain new skills for the next thing in their career, and then
Right.
watch them go into the next role that they have.
This is amazing. And so for people that are not familiar with how, Randstad or staffing firms work, I just want to break this down for a moment. So when you say your people, you mean that you're employing consultants that are then being deployed to potential employers. Okay. Just so that people understand that, because sometimes I know if you're not familiar, it might get confusing. And then when you say you targeted these people, you used the technologies that you have internally to understand where these people are at, what roles they were looking for, and you implicitly looked at specific skills that they needed to potentially develop. So you knew exactly which audience you were going after, and that was definitely technology enabled.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
Got
we
it.
did that because that was the group of people that we saw that had the most interest in learning new skills, especially during COVID. They were working from home. Like there were a lot of socioeconomic factors involved as well. But when you look at the types of talent that we had in our databases that were currently working for us, and when we say working for us, they are employees of Randstad, but they're placed at another organization,
Yes.
like you said, and looked at the types of jobs that we knew that they could become or that they would want to work at next. That was where we focused.
That's amazing. Now, and I'm also thinking, because we talked earlier about how soft skills are so important in this, and we are just now talking about technical skills. So I have a quick question for you is, have you thought this far in advance yet that you were thinking of like what also soft skills we can bring to these people, or is it going to be super focused on technical?
It is super focused on technical, but I'll tell you a secret. So or I should say this, the number 2 most used or taken course in this group has been presentation skills for techies.
Perfect.
Okay. So what we saw was, as we created the learning paths, you have, Python skills and all of these hard skills. But we're seeing people, they have access to take whatever they want. And we're seeing people take communication skills and presentation skills in classes, and Udemy's got a great base at this, classes that actually teach very tactical, technical people how to communicate. And
Yes.
those are the courses that were added to the learning path so that they could take advantage of those.
That's a super exciting.
It's
I
fun.
almost like the next question that I have, thinking about all of these people out there that are on unemployment. I mean, is this, are you guys always looking for additional people to bring on? Because I can assume that there would be so many people that are like, wow, I would love to be working with an organization like Randstad that really cares about where I'm going.
Absolutely. And that's where the technical component of this was really just sort of the first step. The next step that we want to look at is what are the next most in-demand jobs that we can help people skill into? And there are some areas that don't necessarily require a lot of skills. It's more soft skills.
Right.
But when you think about courses, there are great courses around customer service skills and negotiation and diffusing difficult situations that will help people, as our example earlier, who may have been from the hospitality industry, skill into an online customer service type of role. So our next step is going to be looking at other areas, but we also want to be very cognizant of the fact that in this current economy,
Yes.
not everybody has time to sit there and take a course.
Nope.
So the question is also, those are all factors that you have to consider.
No, that makes sense. And I realize you said when we did this, we wanted it to be effective. So I completely understand. You want to make sure that you're not just throwing this out there, that the audience that you're targeting is really going to utilize this and move forward with this. I appreciate that. I can't wait to see what like further results will look like as you continue to embark upon this. Because like you said, it's just one small piece. That's really fascinating.
Well, I think pulling it through is the next piece of that, right? So all of this is great. The talent are loving it. They're learning new skills. Our hope is that we'll watch them get new jobs.
Yes.
The other component is, as we talk technology, understanding what skills they've gained, adding it to their profile so that then we can match them to higher paying jobs in the future.
Yes.
And as we think about the manufacturing and logistics group and the, professionals groups and a lot of other areas, you really have to think about what skills do they need and where do they want to go. And we did a trial pre-COVID with our manufacturing talent, and we found that most of them were taking courses in technology skills.
Wow.
And that was not something we anticipated, right? We anticipated that maybe they would take supply chain management and you start thinking about, okay, these are human beings. They're not numbers on paper, and they may want to become somebody else someday.
Right.
So that's an understanding that we have to go through as we learn this.
It's a good point, because the other piece of this is like, how do you understand the wants of those employees as well? Because that's like a whole other area. You can throw at them potential, upskilling courses, but is that the direction they want to take? Like, what is that? There's something that you're working on to try to understand what they're interested in as well?
I think we'll get there, to be honest with you. We have, as you can imagine, so many talent and so many areas to focus.
I know.
And we do have to get the technology in place, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. So what else?
Well, that's keeping me busy right now. I think our next step in our relationship with Udemy and a lot of the other skilling vendors, as we think about, content providers, is really being able to understand what's next. Tech is, I hate to say this, but tech is easy, right? It's very easy to say, Python's the new language. People need to learn Python. Soft skills are not easy.
No.
Basic understanding of how to move, like we said, warehouse workers into a more white collar role, or if that's even an option, is a question. The other thing that I'm beginning to be really fascinated by is the sheer lack of training and educational opportunities for, I don't know how to describe it, but for blue collar work.
Yes.
Like, there are no online classes in forklift driving. There's no online classes in warehouse work. There's no online classes in electrical, manufacturing or engineering. There's a few, but not at scale.
Right.
That's where the majority of the jobs are right now.
Right.
So yes, on the job training is critical, but what can we augment that with? And is it just that we augment it with soft skills, if you will, or are there hard technical skills that we can augment that population with? And that's something I'm interested in.
That is really fascinating. I'm going to have to think on that. There's a few things that I've seen lately, like some of the new, again, I tend to think more futuristic. I realize we have to think of like what we can do now, but there's some really amazing technologies I've seen that would unlock the ability to create online experiences, especially for workers in that particular area. But I'm going to have to noodle on like what, I agree with you. What are the things that we can do now to help that particular audience? Because you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the bigger question, candidly, is, does that particular audience want to be helped?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it may not be that us, giving somebody a class online is going to change their life. And that's what we have to think about. If I were, I worked in a restaurant when I was in high school. If I had taken an online class, would it have changed my life? I'm not sure. Right.
Right.
So there's different ways to think about it. And today's, economy and COVID and everything else that we're in right now makes all of that a little bit more complicated.
It's very true. That's one. Anyone in our audience, if they have any interesting information to share along those lines, please get in contact with me, because I agree, like this is something that could be really interesting. So Jenn, we're coming up on the end of our time. I just want to give you one opportunity, and I'll leave it as a completely open-ended question, which is always a little difficult, but I'm sure you can handle it, is just, what would be your last parting words to our audience? And it could be anything from the personal side to what you're doing at Randstad.
That is a tough one. That's like saying, tell me about yourself.
Exactly. It's the age-old awful interview question.
Very impressed. I'm very impressed. I think really what we talked about earlier is critical, because as much as I love to think about the future as well as you do, we're in a situation right now where we all have a responsibility to help make sure that not only ourselves, but all of our workers and our talent and friends and family are employable. And if you don't understand the current technologies that are in place, you can sort of overshoot the idea of making everything futuristic. And if we can focus on right now in this economy with the jobs that are available, helping people understand how to apply for jobs, how to get their resumes together, how to articulate the skills that they have so that they can be understood, we'll be in a much better place for helping people migrate around to other roles. But the same applies to recruiters as well. And like I said, it's our responsibility as staffing agencies, just like it is any other employer, to make sure that the people hiring on our behalf are understanding what implicit skills are and how they actually fit into people's daily lives. So that would be sort of my parting words, is we have a responsibility, we have the tools, but we also have to make sure that we're realistic about functionality and realistic about feasibility right now so that we can make a change in this economy right now.
I absolutely love that. Very now and practical, and something that I think will help a lot of people. Jenn, thank you so much for joining us again. This was really a pleasure. I know that we're going to continue conversations, but if anyone does want to keep in touch with Jenn, you can find her on LinkedIn at Jennifer Seith. That's Seith. Obviously, Randstad is available at randstadusa.com, and probably they are on all the social networks, I can imagine. Great organization. Honestly, I think you guys do fantastic work. If you guys are not familiar or are thinking that staffing firms have a different play, you're wrong. Take a peek. I promise you. And thank you all for listening into Let's Talk About Skills, Baby. If you guys would be so kind to submit a review, offer some feedback, I would greatly appreciate it. And you can find me, Kelly Ryan Bailey, on all of the various social channels as well. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Jenn.
Thank you, Kelly.